This is a radio show with myself, Stu Webb, and Gene Chip Tatum on October the 14th of 1997.
Good morning. My name is Stu Webb. I'm a federal whistleblower informant. I'm filling in today, hosting the show for Dr. David Wolf. And I want to take the time to thank Dr. Wolf for allowing me to do the show this week. Today we're holding court on former President George Bush, current President Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and others. We're holding court of public opinion. Now, my first guest today will be Gene Tatum. Gene is a former NSA/CIA operative who was working directly for Ollie North and Felix Rodriguez. Gene has a very interesting background. Yesterday we talked regarding a lawsuit that I have, a federal RICO lawsuit in Denver, Colorado, filed on July the 31st, the case number 97N1498. This is in regarding to George Bush's money launderer and the racketeering that has gone against me as a result of my exposure of various scandals between the savings and loan, HUD, junk bond, Iran-Contra, drugs and guns in the Denver International Airport. So with that note, I'm going to go directly here to Gene. Gene, how are you this morning?
I'm fine, Stu. Thank you.
Great. Gene, I'm going to ask you, because I don't go by script, I'm fairly Iran-Contra literate to some degree. So what I want you to do is give your background. I want you to tell the people how you got involved in the Central Intelligence Agency, NSA, your background starting with Vietnam forward. Basically, if you'll take 10 or 15 minutes and just go through this, including the areas of Colorado where you worked and other things. So, Gene, I'm just going to let you take it from there.
Okay, Stu, thanks. I guess I should start back during the late 60s as I was a college student and made an F on a chemistry exam. I found myself getting a letter in the mail saying that I needed to go down to the induction station and take my physical. Well, I really didn't want to go into the Army during Vietnam. I really didn't want to go to Vietnam. But there wasn't going to be much choice. I was going into the service, so I decided to start shopping the services, and I did just that. I went to the Navy, and I kind of liked the idea as a kid wearing bell-bottom blue jeans and Cambry shirts. But, I was raised in Florida, getting on those boats, going out deep sea fishing, For a day, it was bad enough. For months at a time, I just knew I didn't want to do that. I knew I didn't want to go in the Marine Corps. My uncle had just returned from Vietnam and had burns all over his body from Air Force fast movers dropping napalm and missing their target and hitting him. I knew Army wasn't the way. Friends from high school had already come back and had been severely wounded. So I went into the Air Force recruiter's office, and the Air Force recruiter said, "Son, we're going to make you an air traffic controller, and even if you do go to Vietnam, you'll be in an air-conditioned control tower hundreds of miles away from the action." Well, that was for this kid. Besides, I like color blue. That was one of my favorite colors. I guess that's how we choose things when we're young like that. What uniform would I look best in? Subsequently, I graduated in the top of my ATC class out of Keesler Air Force Base, and I was sent to Fort Benning. We went to jump school. The top 10% of the class did, a number of us. We went to survival school. We went to water survival school. We went to jungle survival school. We went to diving school. We went through the whole gamut. During the process, no one had ever told us that we were a part of a new AFSC, which is an Air Force specialty code in the Air Force called combat controllers. If you can imagine, the enemy is bearing down upon our troops in the jungle. With the fast movers, we had a problem on precise positions of the enemy, so it would be the combat controller's job to parachute in between the enemy and the friendly, call in and guide in the airstrikes, and then extract with the friendly troops. We, as combat controllers, we support our own troops, but we supported allied troops also. That's why I just say friendly. During Vietnam, during one of our missions called Operation Red Rock, myself and our team members, there were 13 of us at the time, were captured. I spent 92 days in captivity. It was a CIA operation. We We were briefed initially by a man out of Washington and a man out of Saigon. The man out of Washington was General Haig. The man out of Saigon was a man named Colby. He was known as Ambassador Colby at the time. When I was debriefed, recovering in a hospital in Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, I was told at that time that I would be under the operational control from that time forward of the Central Intelligence Agency. The reason for that was simple. We were where we weren't supposed to be. We were doing something to an allied position, to an allied country, that if the rest of the countries found out that we'd done such a thing, there would be absolutely no face saved by the presidency, who was President Nixon at the time. And he was nervous about that. He had ordered our soldiers neutralized, killed, so that no one would ever know what we had done. But two of us did survive. So under the operational control of the CIA, I was given a code name and worked for the CIA from that time through 1978, late 78, early 79, when I left active service and entered into the civilian community. During my time under the operational control of the Central Intelligence Agency, I had assignments into Yugoslavia, the communist bloc countries. In the mid-70s, late 70s, I was sent into Colorado in support of some money laundering that was done there. And the reason the money laundering needed to be done for the CIA is very basic. Under the Colby administration, well, folks, it sounds like we've lost Gene Tatum. We're going to hope that he's going to be back on the air here in a moment. It seems that Gene had some problems yesterday with his phone. I was going to have him as a guest for a half an hour yesterday and continue the interview today regarding what the Central Intelligence Agencies does and George Bush's shadow government do to people like me, who, should we say, blow the whistle and provide information of wrongdoing. Yesterday, Gene's phone was totally blown off the air, should we say. I tried contacting him. Their excuse was that he had not paid a phone bill back in June. Now, I would imagine if someone didn't pay their June phone bill, they would have shut their phone off long ago. So, we'll hopefully have Gene back here in just a few minutes for the interview. I'm going to also give you a little bit more information regarding Gene Tatum that people can pull up on a website, etc. They can get a fantastic article that appeared just back this past April-May issue, 1997. It's called the Pegasus File. It's in what is called the Nexus magazine. I'll give the address. It's care of Nexus, 33 Queens Road, and it's east, and it's spelled Grinstead, Grinstead, west, and it's spelled Sussex, RH191 BC, United Kingdom. There is a phone email address that says david.g7. and it's ukonline.co.uk. And we'll wait till we get Gene back on the line here. still I'm back.
Okay, great. Continue with your story, Gene.
Where was I cut off?
You were cut off regarding the fact that you had money laundered into Colorado and your 1978 time frame that you went into retirement.
Okay, the reason that we needed to launder money, I guess, for no other word, no other explanation, is Congress wanted control of all the funds for the CIA, all the black funding, all black projects or all covert projects needed to be approved by Congress. The Central Intelligence Agency administration didn't agree with that, so they put together various schemes that were put in operation around the world in order to bypass this need for Congress to fund our covert operations. Part of those operations, as I say, took place right in Colorado.
Now, this is illegal activity, isn't it, Gene?
Yes, it is illegal activity.
This is not approved by the Congress or the Senate.
It was not approved by Congress or Senate, these operations that took place around the United States and around the world.
Which means that anybody who committed or was involved was breaking the law.
Well, I need to plead the fifth on that, buddy.
What I'm pointing to is the fact that intelligence agency does activity that's totally illegal without congressional or senatorial approval?
Sure they do, and there are several reasons for that. You know, Congress and Senate can't keep a secret to save their lives. They're out there to gain political approval rather than to look out for the best interest of the United States, most of them. A good example of that are many of the deaths that we suffered as Task Force 160, the black helicopters, many of you know, going into Grenada. We lost men simply because a congressman couldn't keep a secret. They were told that morning at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning that the U.S. troops were going into Grenada, and instead of allowing that to take place, they thought it was inhumane for us to invade the Cubans in Grenada. Thought it was absolutely inhumane, so they called the Cuban embassy and told them that we were coming in. We had the element of surprise going for us. We didn't any longer. The guns were aimed at us, and the Cuban soldiers were waiting. What should have been a piece of cake exercise ended up costing several good soldiers' lives.
Okay, one of the questions I have, Gene, is the activity of the Central Intelligence Agency, in particular a shadow government that was created by George Bush. Is it or is it not working in behalf of the American people?
Well, it can't be working in behalf of the American people. Let me explain to you one of the things that he did. As director of the Central Intelligence Agency, he set up a network which included Silverado Savings and Loan right there in Denver. He set up a network where he could go in, take the solid assets of lending institutions, replace those with junk bonds, and take control of these solid assets as solid real estate, sell it for cash, and put it in a black budget or in a unnumbered account. You know, when I talk about black budgets, it doesn't mean that they have a bank sitting over on Capitol Hill. It means that we dealt through BCCI, we dealt through Nova Scotia Bank of Nova Scotia, Credit Suisse, Swiss American Bank out of Antigua, many offshore banks.
You mentioned BCCI. I have a document that shows that Hillary Clinton was the attorney of record representing BCCI when it first came to scandal. This was on March 17, 1978, case number 78-0469 against Jackson, Stevens, and others, Burt Lance, and a whole bunch of Saudis in your Middle Eastern families. This was where they were trying to take over First American bank shares. Are you familiar with that? And the connection with Hillary Clinton?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the first time I heard the name Clinton was in about 83, when I met him as the governor of Arkansas, delivering a cooler with 3 kilos of cocaine and a bunch of cash to him.
Would you explain that? Go ahead and explain that, because you have mentioned it, and we'll get back with your background.
Sure. When I came back into, as I stated earlier, in late 78, I left active service for the government, went into civilian life. In early 1980, I was approached by 2 gentlemen and told that I was reactivated. I was placed back into government service, this time into the Army. I was sent to a place called Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I was a rotary wing helicopter pilot for Task Force, for at the time, 160th Aviation Battalion. I flew Little Birds, which were the Loach helicopters that many of you may remember from Vietnam. It's the Hughes 500, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. Magnum PI, the colorful helicopter flown in Magnum PI, is the civilian version of the Hughes 500, or of the Loach. That's the Hughes 500. We flew those in attack posture, and in night vision, with special equipment to allow night vision flight at the time, something really unheard of. The types of terrain and the types of flights that we would make with these aircraft. Because we were not controlled, and because none of the aircraft nor the personnel were on the lists belonging to the United States Army, we had unlimited flight time. Many military units had to account for their flight time, and the way that works is their budgets are subtracted per hour of flight time so that they zero out their budgets at the end of the year. We did not have that accounting in place, and we would later find, as ones out of Honduras, marked medical supplies, and deliver those around the United States. Some of the places we would deliver those, because we were helicopters, we had a limited area that we flew. We didn't like to fly more than three to four fuel loads, so that restricted us in how far we would fly. However, we could fly up from Corpus Christi all the way to Fort Campbell in a circle, if you were to circle that of that area. We would fly into different places in Kentucky, into Mississippi, and into Arkansas, and into Texas. One of the places we would normally fly in Arkansas was Little Rock Air Force Base. At Little Rock Air Force Base, on numerous occasions, my crew chief and myself dropped off coolers. On one occasion, we decided to open the cooler to check the contents. The cooler, actually, there were two of the coolers. One contained nothing but cocaine, probably over 100 bricks of cocaine. The other contained a lot of cash and 3 bricks of cocaine. Those were to be delivered to the same man that we always delivered them to at Little Rock Air Force Base, a man named Dr. Lassiter.
Dr. Dan Lassiter.
Dr. Dan Lassiter, that's correct. On this particular occasion, we were told to wait. Sometimes we could just drop them at the FBO, or not the FBO, base operations there. This particular occasion, we were told to wait. So we waited, and we waited over an hour for them to show up. When they finally did show up, a van, a limo, and a plain unmarked car pulled up. Out of the unmarked car was a man who had been with Dr. Lassiter on several occasions, Buddy Young, showing his badge. He sponsored Dr. Young, or Dr. Lassiter into the base.
Buddy Young at the time was Clinton's chief security officer.
He was actually the governor's chief of security.
And he currently is the head of FEMA in Texas, I believe.
Yeah, in the Texas region. I think it's a numerous state region that he oversees.
Yes,
he earned his keep. on this particular occasion, we did the limo pulled up. 3 people got out of the limo. One of them stayed by the door. 2 of them walked toward us. One was Dr. Lassiter. He shook my hand. The other was a man he introduced as the governor. The governor of Arkansas at the time, Bill Clinton.
Mr. Bill Clinton, correct?
That's correct. One cooler was with the light cooler with the cocaine and the money was put into the van, and then Governor Clinton got into the van and departed. The other cooler was put in a limo. The man standing by the door was introduced as Jackson Stevens. So it was just a boys' night out, if you know what I mean.
How much you had indicated to me in the past that many times there was money in these coolers as well.
There was money in the coolers that I would fly within the continental United States. When I was flying these same coolers later in Central and South America, no, it was normally cocaine or another powder.
Now, where was the cocaine coming from, and who was giving the orders on this?
In 1985, I was sent undercover as a medevac pilot to Honduras. I based out of a place called Pomarola Air Base. My job was to work for the Army as a medevac pilot. I was additionally tasked to work for the CIA out of Mill Group in Tegucigalpa, which is the embassy. And the third set of orders would come from, on Operation Pegasus, would come from a man in country named Felix Rodriguez. I could receive orders from Rodriguez, another man who would from time to time be in country, Amir Amnir, who was Israeli. Another person that I would
He was also a member of the NSA Council, or NSA, correct?
He was a confidant of George Bush.
Okay.
Whether he was a member, I don't know. The third person that I would routinely receive missions from was a man out of Washington, which was my actual handler. We called him Jake. His name was Oliver North.
Colonel Oliver North, as in the Iran-Contra hearings.
Lieutenant Colonel North, that's correct.
The one that has a radio show that continually goes on the air lying to the American people.
That's the man.
That's the man. Go ahead, Gene. The cocaine, in particular, was being manufactured where?
In the Contra camps themselves. I flew Buzz Sawyer and Bill Cooper from San Lorenzo, Honduras, where I picked them up, into a little airstrip, or a little Contra camp called El Paraiso. At the camp, they met with the Contra leaders. They discussed logistics on bringing arms, flying arms, and dropping the arms, where they needed them, how many, what a reasonable load was for the Contras, what they could actually mobilize out of the jungle once it's been dropped. You know, that's always an item you have to look at. I mean, a cargo aircraft can carry a lot of equipment, but can the people on the ground move that equipment? So this was all discussed at this meeting. In addition to that, when we left, we were given coolers marked vaccine and told to give it to a C-130 in La Mesa when we dropped off the pilots going back to Ilopango Air Base in San Salvador, or El Salvador. When we landed a little hard that day. It was a high DA day. We bounced around a little bit, and one of the coolers got popped open. Inside the cooler, we found cocaine. The coolers were destined to go to Panama on a C-130. The man to pick them up there was another doctor, a man named Dr. Harari. Now, this was vaccine, and it seemed awfully strange to us the vaccine would be leaving the Contra camps rather than going into the Contra camps. So, having experienced what I did in the earlier 80s, I was very suspect of what was going on. So, I called my handler, Felix Rodriguez, and he said, "Oh, yes, well, it really is cocaine, Mr. Tatum. But they're bound for the world courts as evidence. It's goods seized from the Sandinistas. It's nothing that was produced by the Contras." I didn't question that. What I questioned was, why would the Sandinistas be needing to sell this? Because they were given all their equipment free by the Soviets. That's part of what the Soviets would do for countries for their allegiance. So I decided I was going to make notes on the back of the flight plans, just to cover ourselves. And routinely, when I would land at base operations, land back at base operations, I would go into the flight plan that was filed before I left. I would make notes on the back of that flight plan, what happened, who I contacted, who I talked to, what cargo was on board, and who the people were on board. Those notes remained with the Honduran government through the years and are now available as evidence against all these guys. Now, this isn't one particular one that I'll talk about right now that I just spoke about. Was February 26, 1985. A year and a half before anyone ever heard the name Oliver North. His name appears on the back of this flight plan where we're talking about the cocaine that was found on board the aircraft.
Okay, now, Gene, you have those documents available. Would you give out in the Tatum Chronicles?
Those documents are available free online at our website, or they're available if you're not on the web. You can call 1-800-201-7892, extension 58. That's 800-201-7892, extension 58, and ask for the Tatum Chronicles. What's interesting about the Tatum Chronicles is I went to Honduras to recover these, certified copies of these in 1995. As a part of our insurance policy, upon returning to the United States, I was seized upon by the FBI, arrested, and held and told if I didn't turn those documents over, I'd be charged with treason. Well, in lieu of turning them over, I published them and sent a copy to the White House because I knew if I gave them to those guys, they were headed for the shredder. That wasn't going to happen. These belong to the American people.
Now, Gene, would you give out your website also?
Sure. http://www.wild-life.com. So that's www.wild-life.com.
Okay, Gene, I want to get into particular, take it from 1978 and take it forward basically on a timeline of when you worked for him, when you were semi-retired, should we say, inactive, etc., up to the time of your arrest and your charge of treason they brought against you.
When I retired from government service the first time, I moved to Colorado. I had lived in Colorado. I'd met my wife. She was actually from Colorado. And while I was active in Colorado, one of our jobs was to move equipment, move documents out of southeast Colorado into an area in Denver, into particular attorneys' offices.
That attorney being on 17th Street, Norman Brownstein, correct?
That's correct. The attorney's name was Brownstein.
Okay, what were these particular documents that were being done?
Well, you know, when you're driving for an hour and a half, 2.5 hours, depending on whether I was delivering them to Colorado Springs or to Denver, you have a lot of time on those roads, especially back then, and they were pretty obscure roads. So I would page through them, and they seemed to be titles to properties, documents, titles, closing documents on numerous properties. I mean, when I say numerous, I mean I would carry routinely 10 to 15, a box of 10 to 15 properties at a time up to his office.
Where were these properties coming from?
They were being processed in southeastern Prowers County. The properties were all over the state, primarily through the Rocky Mountain region. You know, the what's that called, the Front Range along there?
Yes.
The properties were located along the Front Range primarily. A few years later, I read in the news that billions of dollars of HUD properties were missing from the index from Colorado HUD.
These were properties that apparently were repossessed HUD houses.
These were repossessed, yeah, that's correct.
And so you were processing the documents, taking basically what was going on in Colorado, Norman Brownstein. They were processing from down in the near Springfield, I believe it is, where you were operating. They were processing these deeds and so forth that were stolen from the United States government HUD houses off of HUD repo lists. They were going to the infamous Norman Brownstein to be processed, obviously, in other people's names.
That's correct, or other corporations. Primarily, they were put in corporate names.
To hide the identity of the individuals.
That's right.
That were stealing. Okay. Once you go on in your timeline...
Stealing's an awfully tough word for what the government was doing there.
Yes. Go ahead, Gene, with your timeline.
They were simply substituting ownership, is how we ended up putting it.
Moving properties from HUD into private individuals' hands.
That's correct.
Okay. Then the other activities that you were doing during the 80s, etc., 70s, 80s, from the 70s?
Well, one of the problems you have, as we talked about the cocaine earlier, one of the problems you have is when you send that into the United States, and it ties right in. We were tying, I found in later years that cocaine was tied right into the Marcellus family out of Louisiana, which is the mob. They were using a trucking company, Ashley Trucking, out of Mississippi, to distribute this cocaine. And that's only from their area. If the cocaine were delivered to Texas or California or Colorado or Ohio, it would be different companies, different mob bosses who had an existing network to distribute the goods. That was important. Anyone could bring it in back then, but having the network to distribute it is something else. Another problem is if you have that network in place to distribute all of these drugs, what you also need is a way to launder that money, to hide that money. So we found it very advantageous to use the banking laws, the way that they were set up in particular states. In Colorado, branch banking wasn't in place. In other words, if there was a Pioneer Savings and Loan or back, say, Norwest or something like that, on the one corner, it was not associated as far as their documents and banking with one on the next corner. So there was no actual tie where they would open it, you'd go in, make a deposit in your account number, say you had account number 555. At the other bank, that account number 555 may not be you. So we were able to launder the money very effectively by providing new construction loans to builders throughout the eastern slope.
Okay, now these construction loans primarily came through which entity?
Well, there were several entities. We would normally set up proprietary mortgage brokers, mortgage lenders, as mortgage lenders weren't licensed back then, and I don't know that they are even now. These mortgage lenders would supply loans to builders. I know one of the builders used, I recall, was Larry Mizell, the Mizell Homes.
Now this Larry Mizell is the CEO of a company called MDC Holdings of Denver, which is the parent company for hundreds of entities, of which I found. This is the money laundering angle that I did the money trail on. And one of the entities being Richmond Homes, Colorado's largest home builder, etc. Is that correct?
Richmond Homes was one. U.S. Homes was another. I don't know who owns these. I know we dealt with Mizell on occasion.
Well, the MDC filings in the state of Colorado show that MDC owns Richmond Homes.
Okay, well, they laundered a lot of money for the government, and I'm sure the government is very thankful to them today. What we could do is we could effectively launder $1 million in drug money by simply providing a $100,000 construction loan. And the way we would do that is we would provide the builder, say it was Mizell, $100,000 to build a home. We would go into a closing. We would have a closing. The funds were put on the table for them. He would have those. He would then have a permanent loan in place at the end of the new construction loan, which was a 3 to 6 month period. That the closing documents from that permanent loan, which was supplied by local banks or local mortgage companies, paid us back. So we had that closing document to show that $100,000 with interest. Maybe $106,000, $108,000. We would get back, and we would take that closing document and that money that from the closing to our bank. And then what we would do is we would have 10 accounts set up, and we would go to the next bank, and we would show that document in cash, and then the next bank with that document in cash. And once we had set up with local bank presidents, normally we would deal with the vice president of the commercial sections in the banks. We were able to effectively launder in 10 bank that $100,000 10 times on that same closing document.
In other words, you came out laundering about $900,000 of illegal drug money.
That's correct.
Okay.
With every loan.
Okay. Since we're on the subject of money laundering and the fact that I have been exposing the money laundering in Colorado involving Leonard Millman, Larry Mizell, MDC Corp., Philip Wynn, and others, would you discuss more of the detail of your knowledge of the activities, in particular involving Millman, Mizell, and others? Leonard Millman. Gene, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, my former father-in-law, the one that I currently have this federal racketeering suit against, I'll address a few questions to you because we're, quote-unquote, I'm holding court of public opinion because of the lawsuit that I have, and that there's a CIA judge, Nottingham, who will not recuse himself from the case, will not remove himself. And I have a feeling that they're going to bury me. I've been hearing these rumors. They're going to stick me in a jail cell and hang me as a suicide if I don't, quote-unquote, do a deal with them.
Well, the sheriff of Nottingham, as he's affectionately referred to by the people who are held and sentenced by him, is a very, very hard man, very harsh when it comes to sentencing, very one-sided when it comes to, and I think that's one reason that Nottingham wasn't chosen as the person to hold court for McVeigh or Nichols. It was the chief judge, Judge Mage. He is actually the most liberal of all the judges in Denver. If someone were going to expose an operation, quite frankly, we would have three options. We would have to neutralize that person. He would be either intimidated into not going forward with the expose, and there are many ways to intimidate people. You can just make threats against them. You can move, once you move toward those threats though, and actually do something, that's coercion. And that's the second phase that we would go into, is we would coerce them into doing it, like charge them with, throw them in jail, it would be an actual movement toward neutralizing that person.
So does it make it look like a drug user, a drug dealer, or a drunk?
Oh, you could accuse them of anything.
As an example, I've been arrested 10 or 15 times on supposedly DUI charges, but yet they've all been dismissed.
Well, yeah, and the primary thing, too, is, to harass and hassle a person like that. But what you want to do is, if you don't think that you can close them down, is the next step is to make them non-credible. And that's putting them into a federal situation, because the federal side is such a one-way street. We had so many contacts through the Department of Justice. Heck, we had Bill Weld, who worked with us routinely. He was the Attorney General under George Bush. Very, very easy to get anything done in the early 80s. I guess it's pretty easy with the Attorney General now.
Well, in other words, as an example, where I was held illegally from 1992 to 1993, charges finally dismissed against me for supposedly harassing phone calls to Leonard Millman, George Bush's money launderer.
Sure, the easiest thing for us to do is, to doctor up some phone records. That's simple to do. Most of the large phone companies are hip pocket phone companies. They'll do what we ask them to. Otherwise, they fall under scrutiny by the IRS or by someone, or the Federal Trade Commission. There are so many ways to intimidate the large groups financially into doing what we want them to do. That's a piece of cake. That's nothing to it. But the key thing in that is, in holding someone for so long, we would normally get them off under a psychological evaluation, and we could hold them indefinitely in Springfield or now over in North Carolina is a new facility.
And I got the infamous trip to Springfield during the time that I was incarcerated because they said I was incompetent to stand trial on charges that were bogus to begin with.
Sure.
But yet the government, in this particular case, I was one of the lucky few to get out of there with an evaluation saying I was totally competent and there wasn't anything the matter with me.
In the early 80s, anyone who blocked our efforts would end up in Springfield. Springfield was full of Iran-Contra era people who were in any way trying to block the activities of the drug running, the operational money laundering, and so forth. There was nothing too getting a person put over in Springfield.
Okay, in Springfield, I will confirm for the edification of the listeners that Gene is right, that there are tremendous amounts of people that were involved in activities for the Central Intelligence and others that I had come across. Out of the 3,000 prisoners of Springfield, Missouri, they call it the Hospital for the Criminally Insane. There are approximately 2,500 that were Iran-Contra people, and people that were whistleblowers. I ran across many people, many, that were in there for reporting to the FBI and the Department of Justice various illegal activities, such as on Gunther Russbacher. Are you familiar with Gunther?
And for those of you who haven't met her, most of you haven't, don't know Gunther Russbacher, he looks a lot like Robert Duvall, the actor.
And for the background, Gunther Russbacher was doing quote-unquote business, as we call it, in Denver, Colorado. He was involved with Silverado Savings National Brokerage Group of Companies, which was the MDC subsidiary company involving Meyer Blinder, the penny stock brokerage company out of Denver, etc. Gunther was also involved in the shipment of F-16 fighter jets from Granite City Steel in Illinois to Zapata Oil Company warehouses in the port of Houston.
And Gunther has recently fled the United States and gone to England. He was being held in prison in Missouri.
Yes, and Gunther has spent, I believe, the past 7 years of the past 9 of his life in jail cells.
That's correct.
Okay. Your activity in particular with Leonard Millman. Does Leonard Millman have the power to retaliate using government officials against me for exposing him?
Well, as I said, the government is very, very thankful to Mr. Millman and Mr. Mizell for their abilities to launder such large sums of money. So certainly their contacts at high government levels and their past performances earn them credit if credit is needed, especially if there's a chance that Millman or Mizell is going to be exposed by a whistleblower. It's in the best interest of those government officials involved to ensure that whistleblower is silenced.
Okay, that includes Norman Brownstein, the CIA counsel.
Yes, it does.
Okay, for the edification of the listeners, MDC Holdings' former director, retired 1991, was Norman Brownstein due to the exposure that I did pertaining to illegal political campaign money laundering. MDC was started by Leonard Millman and Larry Mizell in 1972. And MDC Holdings is the parent company that launders the money, Richmond Homes, etc. Further, MDC's other board member is Philip Wynn, the one that was convicted for his role in the HUD scandal. Gene?
Yes.
Denver International Airport. I know you're not that familiar with it, but was this an operation to steal from the American people?
if it wasn't, they certainly missed a good shot, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They took it. Denver International Airport at $16 billion final estimated payout when it was supposed to be an original $1.5 billion. Now, you've heard that they're having problems at DIA currently.
That's right.
Okay, would you explain what you heard on this?
Well, I only heard that during the construction period, the problems that they've had bad concrete pour. In other words, the concrete wasn't up to standards, up to specs, and the runways are cracking. They have all kinds of problems where things weren't built to specs, yet the government was charged as if it were built to specs and beyond specs. So there was a lot of money taken by contractors and subcontractors there under government contracts. And what happened to this money? You know, much of it. Well, you know, when you start out with a contract as low as the initial contract was on DIA, and you end up at $16 billion, where did all that money go? I mean, you can build Disney World for $16 billion, and all you have is an airport. Somebody made a lot of money off of that.
Yes.
And one thing that might be said is there's a company called Morrison-Knudsen who had recently gone into bankruptcy, who does a lot of government contracts. They built Fort Drum and built some underground facilities at Fort Drum in upstate New York for the government. You have to wonder, you know, they've also recently gone to Taiwan and have built some government, U.S. government. Now, this was in 1992. They built a U.S. government project in Taiwan. Now, we knew where Taiwan was heading, that it was going back, yet we still went over and built these government contract buildings. What's up with that? There's some real questions about Morrison-Knudsen.
There's some real questions in regarding all the contractors for the edification of the listeners. Bechtel Corporation, former Board of Directors Henry Kissinger and George Shultz and others. Bechtel being the world's largest contractor. That was the general contractor on the Denver International Airport. Hensel Phelps Construction Company that's controlled by, should we say, Larry Mizell and the boys in Denver. The CMTS Construction Management Technical Services that did the inspections on the airport. That is Albert Rose and Leonard Millman, a limited partnership. They use a black man, King Harris, as a front. I have inspectors that were threatened, life-threatening situation if they did not put their stamp of approval. Many of them quit.
What would be real interesting is to get the people to go and look at the ownership of the lands around that particular facility, DIA, and see who sold that land and who owns lands attaching to it, where they want to bring large toll roads in.
Gene, that's one on the money trail, should we say. And when DIA surfaced, I had done that and others. There was an attorney named Dick Young here, a very reputable attorney, a former retired admiral of the Navy, very respectable attorney and gentleman who worked with me hand in hand in 1989, 1990, 91 time frame. All the land tracts that the airport were built on all went back to Philip Wynn, Leonard Millman, Larry Mizell, and MDC Corp. They controlled the land, the construction thereof, and all the land tracts surrounding the airport, including a new freeway called the East 470 Partnership, of which they used government money, federal money as well as state, county, robbed various water departments, etc. We went into total detail of this. They were short like $40 million. They, the boys, meaning the Denver group we'll refer to it as, Mizell, Millman, Wynn, others, got a credit line from from Union Bank in Switzerland to complete the freeway because they could not get enough federal and state funds. They made an agreement with the state and the federal government that they would take this road private. It is going to become a private toll road of which they will collect the toll off of in exchange for putting in the additional $40 million.
Well, you know, let me play the devil's advocate here on that just a minute,
Yes.
Stu. You know, one thing that we would always require in our operations was having a high government. It was attempted, you know, without that high government official in place on DIA or on the previous times. You know, in Arkansas, the government official that kept us from being rooted out was the governor, Governor Clinton. He had the munitions factories in place. He gave them tax-free entities and bonds to come over and set up so that they would build our weapons without the registration numbers on the receivers.
As an example, in this particular case, I do know that because I have the bribes on a Justice Department official who was the United States Attorney at the time, Michael J. Norton, who retired, I believe, when the Clinton administration came in. They fired all the U.S. attorneys. Mike Norton was there to protect. He laundered his bribe through a company called M&L Business Machines. They tried to make it look like a check kiting scandal. It broke the bank of, or the Capital Fed of Aurora. Michael J. Norton was there to protect. He was also one of the ones acting to bring charges against me, to silence me and shut me up. Michael J. Norton covered up the Denver International Airport along with others. Now, Gene, you're familiar that the Justice Department has a special unit there to protect George Bush, is that correct?
Oh, sure.
Okay. The names I would like to give out today for the edification of listeners, for they will know who the bad guys are, should we say. Lee Rennick, Margolis, Mark Richards, David Mann, etc. are in Washington, D.C. These are the ones that protect George Bush to ensure that people are either framed or, should we say, if they're working for operations such as you were working for, they get off any charges if they get caught.
Well, who is routinely used are what we call lifers at Main Justice, people who are there not just for political appointee, but these are people who have been placed and have been there a very long time and are well compensated for their services.
Okay, they not only have this in the Justice Department, but they also have this in the FBI, the DEA, Customs, and other agencies. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And this is to shut people up in the event, say, as myself, where I have brought various scandals pertaining to the Denver connection to light. This is where they use these people to intentionally target me, to silence me and shut me up. Isn't that correct?
That's how we do it.
Okay. Now, you compromised for the government many people. Or should we say for George Bush, correct?
I was working for the government at the time, and I was working for the vice president, or the director of the CIA, the vice president, or the president.
If I may take a moment to read for the listeners. I have a document here that you released back on around the 14th of July. It says the White House, Washington. There's not a date on it. It says DG Chip Tatum.
That is a piece of letterhead, by the way, from the White House.
Yes. Codename Pegasus. You are hereby ordered into service of the United States government. It has been determined that blank has illegally obtained documents which are of vital concern to the security of the United States and selected allies of the United States. It has therefore been determined by finding of the National Security Council that these documents must be recovered. Due to this determination, you are authorized to use whatever means necessary to recover said documents and to ensure that this criminal is brought to justice. You are authorized to exceed existing regulations and FTMs to accomplish this mission. If loss of life occurs as a result of your performance of your duties, you shall be exempt and protected from prosecution. Signed, George Bush. Is this a real document?
Absolutely authentic. It has been authenticated by the SAS.
Okay. Now, you compromised. You were in a position working for the government. You compromised people.
That's correct.
Okay.
That was my job.
Okay. Is there a pattern here, because we're holding court, is there a pattern here of what they have done to me with 20-some-odd arrests? I don't even remember the exact count. Other warrants, the intimidation, the discrediting in newspapers such as Westword, why I'm in jail, being held illegally. USA Today, Time Magazine, other ones call me an anti-Semitic racist pig, which my daughter's Jewish by her mother. Is this a normal tactic of this group of men?
Sure. In the early 70s, we put editors in place in most of our major media sources ex-readers that we recruited and placed them in major media so that they could spin items if we needed them spun.
Okay, and these editors are there for the purpose of spinning any stories of truth, correct?
Sure. Read the news from overseas. You'll read the real news of what goes on in the United States. You know, folks, you can go to your there's Books A Million, there's Borders, there's all kinds of large bookstores today that you can buy the London Telegraph and items, and these overseas-based media sources that will tell you what's going on in your country today, because you won't read it in the New York Times.
Okay, there was an article that I read or was given out the address earlier called the Pegasus File that people can obtain a story about you and your background. It mentions a lot of the Denver connection. It mentions other things. In it, it talks about the boss hogs. And the boss hogs being the various ones. I'll let you go through them. Ollie North is one of the parties involved here. Give me your opinion of Ollie North and where he should be residing at the current time.
Oliver North is a true American hero. He fought for his country in Vietnam, and he earned the ribbons that he earned. For anyone to ever try to deny Lieutenant Colonel North that is very wrong. However, since then he has been born again. Since the deaths that he caused in Vietnam, even though they were for his country, he had a lot of feelings about that, and that he would never be able to cope with that God would not forgive him for that. But Ollie has been born again. But let me tell the people out there, the only thing he is a born-again drug smuggler. I think that he should be able to take those awards and decorations that he did earn and hang him in his jail cell as he does time for what he did to America's youth, bringing that cocaine in.
Now, there was a story that appeared earlier in the year in February in one of the Mexican papers out of Mexico City. And this particular article, a mutual shadow government friend of ours had told me about this. I did not actually obtain the copy. He did because of I don't speak Spanish or read Spanish. There wasn't any reason. In this article, it talked about 40 murders that George Bush and Oliver North were involved with. Are you familiar with any of the murders or murders of witnesses, etc., that Ollie North himself gave orders?
I can tell you about 17 of them. That's about all.
17 of them.
That's correct.
Okay, that means Ollie North is a killer. He should be tried for those murders, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Gene, we've got about 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes here. I would like for you once again to give out on the Tatum Chronicles where people can obtain these, the address, phone number, etc. I also would like to ask if you would come back on the show with me tomorrow, spend another hour.
I certainly will if you'll call me right after the show.
I will do it.
Okay. The Tatum Chronicles, the documents retrieved from Honduras, they're also included in a video, if you'd like a copy of the video, called Presidential Secrets. Both are available by calling 1-800-201-7892, extension 58. That's 800-201-7892, extension 58. I encourage you to get a copy, make a copy of it, and give it to a friend.
Gene, one last question here. I have a federal lawsuit, case number 97N1498, filed in District Court, Denver, Colorado. I believe you've seen the lawsuit.
I have.
Okay. Do I have standing in this lawsuit
Certainly.
where they have taken my daughter and retaliated against me?
There's no doubt you do, but unfortunately, because they put you in a position, and we would routinely do that, where you can't afford an attorney, you're not going to see justice then.
Unless I get the American people behind me, correct?
That's exactly what you need. You need people to write in. You need people to support you in any way that they can so that you can get those documents filed correctly in federal court.
Okay, another question. If I were successful with the proper attorney firms, could I put George Bush's money launderer, Millman, Mizell, and others in jail?
There's no doubt in the world that any competent U.S. attorney that reads the documents that you produced, that they would not immediately indict these people or place them before a grand jury to make a grand jury decide. There's no doubt.
And this would help break up this, what you've infamously called the Olympic drug cartel and the money laundering thereof, correct?
The Olympic cartel, they deal in Olympic proportions.
Okay. Gene, I want to thank you for being on with me. I want to thank the guests, the listeners here, etc. And I'll call you directly after the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
Bye-bye.
And this is Stu Webb. I want to take the time to say thank you to Dr. David Wolf and give out his address, which is 7280 Sandy Shore Drive, Hamlin, New York, 14464. I'll give that again, 7280 Sandy Shore Drive, Hamlin, New York, 14464. His number is 800-705-4598. That's 800-705-4598. I want to thank you, Dave, for allowing me this opportunity this week to be able to do your show and present various people who will be key witnesses in my trial if the day comes that I can get there. If anyone would like to get a hold of me, Stuart Webb, they may do so by calling me. I am here now. This is my phone number. I am no longer in hiding. I'm going to stand up for what is right. I am in a position to where the only way they will stop me from exposing and seeing my child is to kill me. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, anybody wants to support my activities, which is trying to put these men in jail, recover this estimated $1 trillion in assets that I have found the money trail on, and the corporate structures of which, and entities of which they have hidden this money, they can get a hold of me at 303-255-8325. That's 303-255-8325. It's in Denver, Colorado. Please give me a call. I want to thank you for listening.